بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So today's lesson is regarding the different types of hadith. Now, inshallah revision I'll do next lesson inshallah. Now hadith can be looked at in different types or from different angles. Hadith is of different types when you look at it from different angles. Just like we looked at Tawheed and Shirk. If you guys remember, we said Shirk splits into different types depending on which angle we are looking at it from. So from the angle of its ruling, we said Shirk is split into major Shirk and minor Shirk. In terms of its topic, it is split into Tawheed of Rububiyyah, Shirk of Rububiyyah, Shirk of Uluhiyyah, and Shirk of Asma wa Sifat. In terms of how apparent it is, we have two types of shirk. Shirkun jali and shirkun khafi. The apparent shirk and the hidden shirk. So likewise, when it comes to hadith, hadith is of different types depending on the angle that we are looking at it from. Yusuf, come sit in front of me. Martin, you as well. Closer. Now we're going to take these different types. Today we'll try to focus on just one, which is probably the most famous one that you've heard, which is splitting hadith from the perspective or from the angle of its authenticity. How authentic is this hadith or how weak this hadith is. Now, by the end of the lesson, we're going to learn that the hadith divided from this angle is of 5 types. But for now, we are going to split it into 3 types first. I want you to understand these 3 types first, and then later on, I'll explain to you the other 2 extra types as well, inshallah. So, when we look at hadith and we divide it from the perspective or the angle of its authenticity, then generally it is 3 types. What are those 3 types? The 3 which are written over here: Sahih, Hasan, and Da'if. Sahih is translated as authentic, Hasan is translated as good, and Da'if is translated as weak. So in English, you would say authentic, good, or sometimes they call it sound, and Da'if, weak. Or in Arabic, which is the one that I'm going to stick to inshallah in class, Sahih, Hasan, and Da'if. Okay, so Martin, what are the 3 types of hadith? Good. So Sahih, which is authentic, Hasan, which is good, and Da'if, which is weak. Aman, what are they? Give me the Arabic terminologies. Sahih, Hasan, and Da'if. Now the most important one that you need to know now to understand all 3 types is the first one, Sahih. If you understand what makes a hadith Sahih, then knowing what Hasan and Da'if is very easy. Because Hasan and Da'if is basically, if the conditions of Sahih are met, then it will be one of the other 2. So as long as you know what Sahih is, then you'll know what the other 2 are. Now Sahih hadith is basically, in simple terms, a hadith which fulfills 5 conditions. So how many conditions are there for Sahih hadith? 5. 3 of them are 3 conditions that have to be present. That these are 3 things that have to be there. And the remaining 2 are 2 things which can't be there. That's an easy way to remember what these conditions are. 3 that have to be there, and then 2 which cannot be there. So what are these conditions? The first condition which has to be there in Arabic is known as ittisalus sanad, a complete chain, i.e. a complete chain of narration. So remember we said, you might even notice the Arabic word ittisal, which means complete, yani connected. When you say complete chain, you mean a complete connected chain. Ittisal, which means to connect, and then the word sanad. Remember we explained the word sanad? It means the chain of narration. What this basically means is that every single person in that chain of narration is present. So for example, right now if we go like this, I say something, and Awab narrates from me. And then Awab narrates it to Yusuf. Yusuf narrates it to the other Yusuf. Other Yusuf narrates it to Martin. Okay? Then Martin comes on the minbar and he explains and he says, Huzaifah said X, Y, and Z. Right? But he's going to say now, I heard from Yusuf as-Saghir, the small Yusuf, who heard from the big Yusuf, who heard from Awwab, who heard from Huzaifah that he said. That is the whole chain of narration. If Martin just says now that Awwab said that Huzaifah said, how many people are missing in that chain? Two, the two Yusufs. Is it a complete chain of narration? It's not a complete chain of narration. So would it fulfill this condition? It would not fulfill this condition. Therefore, can the hadith be sahih? It cannot be sahih. If Martin says, the big Yusuf told me, that Awwab told him that Huzaifah said X, Y, and Z. No, because the small Yusuf is missing. If he said, I heard from small Yusuf that big Yusuf said that Huzaifah said. No, who's missing? Awwab's missing. So it's not a complete chain of narration. So if we were to take an example of like the Prophet ﷺ and so on, we have the Prophet ﷺ at the top. Then we have the Sahaba. Then we have Tabi'een. Then we have a Tabi'i. And let's just say we have M for Muhaddith, yani the scholar of Hadith after him. So the scholar of Hadith, if he says, I heard from this Tabi'i, who heard from this Tabi'i, who heard from this Sahabi, that the Prophet ﷺ said, is that a complete chain of narration? Complete chain of narration. If the Muhaddith says, I heard, or he says, the Tabi'i said that this Sahabi said that the Prophet said, who's missing? The Tabi'i, and so on. So basically, complete chain of narration means that when this hadith is narrated by whichever book it's in, by the Muhaddith, yeah? So whether it's Imam Bukhari, whether it's Muslim, whether it's Tirmidhi, Nisa'i, whoever it is, he has narrated it with a full chain of narration. I mean, every single person is present. If one of the people is not there, let's say for example the Tabi'i is not there, then is there a full chain of narration? No. Therefore the hadith cannot be sahih. Okay. That is regards to the first chain of the first condition of a sahih hadith. Now the ulama, by the way, the scholars of hadith, they know everything about every single narrator. They know the lives of all the Sahaba, all the Tabi'een, Atba'i Tabi'een. They know who traveled where, whose teachers who lived at what age and who died at what date. They know everything. So if, for example, the Muhaddith was to say that this Tabi'i said, that this Sahabi said, they will know straight away that this Tabi'i never met any of the Sahaba, and they could work out. Or they can work out that, hang on a minute, this person narrated from this person, but these two people never met. These two people never met in their lives. So there's somebody missing. They can work out when the chain is complete and when it's not complete. That is the first condition, ittisal al-sanad. The second condition is al-adalah, that the narrator has to be adil, meaning he has to be trustworthy. This is the second condition. So now we're talking about the narrator itself. Sometimes the ulama split these conditions into that which is linked to the narrator and that which is linked to the chain of narration and so on. But the way I've said it, that's easier for now, which is 3 things that have to be there and 2 things that can't. So the second thing which has to be there is that the narrator has to be trustworthy. Now what does it mean that he has to be trustworthy? Now there are a number of conditions. He has to be Muslim, Baligh, Aqil, all these things. But the main 2 conditions are the 2 that I've mentioned here. Which is what? The narrator has to have taqwa and he has to have muru'ah. Now what does that mean, that he has taqwa and he has to have muru'ah? The definition the ulama give for taqwa is that this is a narrator who does not commit major sins and he is not persistent upon the minor sins. He is a narrator that does not commit major sins, nor is he persistent, yani continuously doing the minor sins. Because if a person consistently does the minor sins, then it becomes a major sin. That's why the ulama, they say, لا كبيرة مع الاستغفار ولا صغيرة مع الاستمرار. There's no such thing as a major sin if a person repents, nor is there anything considered a minor sin if a person constantly does it again and again and again and again. Why? Because the fear of Allah is not in that person if he keeps doing it, if it's a minor sin. So for example, if this person is known to lie, if this person is known to commit another major sin, and so on, then he will not be considered somebody who has taqwa. Likewise, if he's known for, he is somebody who constantly does certain minor sins, then they will not accept hadith from that person. The second part of a person being trustworthy is muru'ah. We took the meaning of muru'ah in the first book that we studied, Ta'zim al-Ilm. Abdul Subhan, what's muru'ah? Don't give me a translation, give me a definition. What's the definition that we give, the explanation that we give for the word?
A person's manliness.
Close? What?
How a person acts.
Osama?
It's like your sort of self-worth, there's like dignity.
Dignity, close? Naim? Adab akhlaq, okay. What's expected of you? Okay, that's close. When Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, his definition that we took in Ta'zim wal-Ilm was what? A person does those actions which beautifies him, and he stays away from actions which lowers his status. Basically, what that basically means is muru'ah is that a person does actions which is not looked down upon in society, or it doesn't take away from his status. And so, for example, I gave this example last time. If you saw the Imam of Masjid Nabawi go and now lead Salah wearing a t-shirt and jeans, right? What would you think? Even now, if Imam here, if I was to lead with that hat on, what would people say? Maulvi Sahab, how can you lead with that hat on? Now, is Salah accepted without a hat? It's accepted without a hat, right? Is it something haram? It's not something haram, right? However, is it from muru'ah? Is it from the dignity of, or something which a person that status should be doing? No, it's not something that he should be doing. So therefore, if a narrator was to be doing certain things which is looked down upon in society, the scholars of hadith wouldn't even accept hadith from that person. Right? This is how strict they were. And obviously this changes and differs from time and place. That which is considered for muru'ah in the UK is different to that which is considered muru'ah in Pakistan, which is different to what is considered muru'ah in Saudi, and so on. That which is considered muru'ah in this century is different to what is considered muru'ah in the previous century. And even individuals might differ on exactly what muru'ah may be. Some of the muhaddithun, if they saw you standing and eating, they wouldn't accept hadith from you. Because the sunnah is what? To sit down. Right? So this would differ from time and place. But the main point being is if that narrator did not have muru'ah, they would not accept hadith from that person. So the second condition for a hadith to be considered sahih, authentic, is that the narrator, not just one narrator, all of the narrators in that chain have to be adil, have to be trustworthy. The third condition is tammud dabt, is they have to have complete precision. That's the literal translation of it, but what that basically means, perfect memory. The third condition is that those narrators have to have perfect memory, meaning they rarely ever make a mistake. Okay, Yusuf Saghir, how many mistakes is a lot of mistakes? 4. Good number. Hasnan, how many mistakes is a lot of mistakes? 5, 10? There's a big difference between 5 and 10. 5. Bilal? 3, 4. Haidar? Yours is the closest answer so far. Right. If a person's only narrated 10 hadith and he makes 5 mistakes, is that a lot of mistakes? That's a lot of mistakes. If a narrator has narrated 1,000 hadith and he makes 5, it's okay. Yeah. If he's narrated 5,000 hadith and he makes 5 mistakes, that's rare. Okay. So there's no number on it. There's no number. It all a scholar of hadith, somebody who's a specialist in hadith, he will come and he will look at each narrator individually, see exactly what type of mistakes they are and how many hadith he has narrated, and work out from there how many, is that considered perfect memory, or is it considered good memory or weak memory, and so on. So there's no particular number. Okay. However, when we say perfect memory, it's of 2 types. As you can see in Arabic, I've written. The first I've written, ضبط صدر. Dabt means precision, or if you want to call it memory of the heart. And ba is dabtu kitab, which is memory of a book. What that basically means, dabtu sadr is what everyone's thinking basically, which is that you memorize from heart. And from memory you narrate. Person said this, person said this, person said this, and so on. Or with the whole chain of narration. Okay? But there's another type which is dabtu kitab, precision of the book, meaning This is a narrator, whenever he narrates, he doesn't use his memory. He's always got a book. He's always got a book with him. Every time he narrates, he opens that book and he reads from that book, and he only narrates looking in from that book. And if a person's known that he's got a book and he always reads from that book and he never makes a mistake from that book, then he would be considered somebody who would come under perfect memory, because he's narrating from the book and he's looking in and he's never making a mistake. So he's somebody that never makes a mistake. But then obviously, let's say he's somebody that's known. When he reads from the book, he never makes a mistake. But if it's from memory, like if one day he doesn't have the book with him and he narrates, he does make mistakes, the scholars will differentiate. This particular hadith, did he use a book or did he not use a book? If he used a book, we'll accept the hadith. If he didn't use a book, we wouldn't consider this condition to be accepted. And this happens sometimes. You'll find a scholar of hadith, he has all of his hadith written down in a book. He's traveled. Obviously, back in the day, they never had, printing houses where things are nicely printed. They would have to travel themselves 1-2 months. We will mention some stories later, just to listen to one hadith, and they would write it down in their own personal copy. Then they will travel again to hear another hadith, and so on. Right? So they will have their own personal copies, and then, qadar Allah, the whole house goes on fire. So he's lost his book. So the scholars will say, if he narrated hadith before this date, we will accept it because he used the book. If he narrated hadith after this date, we will not accept the hadith. Why? Because he no longer had that book with him. So, all of this is looked into when narrating into hadith. But just for you guys, perfect memory is somebody who rarely makes a mistake, which is subjective according to how many hadith he has narrated. And this is of two types, ضبط صدر, either he's perfected his memory when he narrates by heart, or ضبط kitab, when he narrates using a book. These three conditions are three conditions that have to be there. If they are not there, then the hadith is not considered sahih. The next two conditions, are two conditions that cannot be there. Two things that cannot be there. If they are found in the hadith, then we don't accept the hadith. The first, and out of all of the conditions, is condition number 4. Adamu ash-shudhudh. Adam means like the absence of. Shudhudh, basically contradictions. There can't be any contradictions. What does that mean? Basically means you have a narrator. Now this narrator is trustworthy. We're not saying he's a weak narrator. He's a trustworthy narrator. Perfect memory, all of that. But he's narrated something and he's contradicted those who are more trustworthy than him. He's contradicted those who are more trustworthy than him. If that is the case, the one who's contradicting, right, those who are more trustworthy, his hadith would be considered shadh, and it will not be accepted. I'll give you an example. I was to narrate something. Inshallah, you consider me trustworthy, inshallah. Right. I say, on this day, X, Y, and Z happened. For example, I say the Prophet someone left. For example. Then you have the likes of Shaykh Fawzan, Shaykh Abdul Karim al-Khadair, Shaykh al-Muhsin al-Abbad. They're all narrating, they're saying, no, the Prophet went right, he turned right. What am I saying? He turned left. What are they saying? That he turned right. So, my narration would be considered shadh, and it will not be accepted. And their narrations will be considered sahih. Does that make sense? So, Adam al-shudhudh, there can't be any contradictions. I.e., a narrator cannot contradict those who are more trustworthy than him. The fifth condition, the fifth thing that can't be there, Adamu al-illah. There can't be any ilal, any hidden defects. Hidden defects is basically hidden mistakes. I.e., when you look at it, what's apparent is that there's no mistakes. From the apparent, the whole chain of narration is complete. It's all fully connected. The narrators are all trustworthy. They all have perfect memory. There's no contradiction going on. But there's these hidden defects, right? So for example, you'll say, like, okay, these two narrators actually met. They did meet. They both went to Muhammadi Masjid. However, on this particular day, this student was absent. Right? For example, who's not here today? Abbas is not here today. You were quick with that one, huh? Right. So Abbas turns around and he says, yeah, Huzaifah in lesson, he said X, Y, and Z. And all of you, if you hear that, yeah, Abbas comes to the lessons. He comes to Muhammadi Masjid, he knows Huzaifah, khalas. He must have heard it from him. But the Muhaddithun will be like, hang on a minute, he didn't attend this lesson on this day. Therefore, this is a hidden defect. Another example of hidden defect sometimes the ulama give is, the hadith, the 7 people who are under the shade of Allah on that day when there's no shade. Okay, and what it means by the shade of Allah is the shade of, does Allah have a shade? No, it means the shade of the arsh of Allah, as it comes in other narrations. One of them is talking about a person who gives so much charity that his left hand does not know what his right hand has spent. That's the wording of the hadith. Meaning, he doesn't tell anyone. Okay, not that he hides his left hand, it means that he doesn't tell anyone, right? Keeps it secret. In some narrations, some of the narrators said that he doesn't know, his right hand does not know what his left hand has spent. The spending done with your left hand or with your right hand? You should do it with your right. When you give, when you take, everything should be done with your right hand. So some narrators ended up saying the right hand does not know what the left hand spent. They say, this is the hidden defect. This is the illah. So as you can see, the ilal can be in the chain of narration, who met who and who was where and so on. It can also be in the text as well. And this is in the science of hadith, this is a separate science by itself. It's known as the science of ilal. Plural of illah is ilal. And this is a very, very difficult science. Not every muhaddith is a specialist in this science. Only the highest caliber of muhaddithun are specialists in the science. Like Imam Ahmad, Imam al-Bukhari, Ali ibn Madini, and others. Okay? Right. So these are the 5 conditions. What are the 5 conditions? The first 3, we have to have complete chain of narration. All of the narrators have to be trustworthy. And they all have to have perfect memory. Don't say good memory, perfect memory, because good is going to come in hasan. And the 2 things that we can't have is no contradictions and no hidden defects. Right. Everyone understood? Ahmed, repeat the 5 conditions. Complete chain. Can't have any hidden defects. Can't have contradictions. Do you know what contradictions means? Yeah, one person says one thing, other person says something else. Missing 2 things that have to be there. Complete precision, perfect memory. Good. And last one? It's about the narrator. Give you a clue, like he can't be a liar, he can't be. They have to be trustworthy. Good. So these are the 5 conditions. Okay. We come now to hasan. Now, the ulama differed. When they came to giving a definition of hasan, they differed. Why? Because hasan is like a grey area. It's like a level in between sahih and da'if. So where exactly does it go? They differed a lot. However, Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, he came along and he gave a good definition, which most of the people stick to now, which is a hasan hadith is the exact same as sahih, except for one condition. Only one condition is different. If you're paying attention, I just kind of alluded to it. Who knows which condition is different? Name? The precision. Instead of perfect memory, we say good memory. It's a khiffatul dabt, light precision. That's the only difference. So, number 1, the first condition, exact same, complete chain narration. Number 2, they have to be trustworthy. Just number 3 would be different. Where? It's good memory instead of perfect memory. Number 4 is the same, number 5 is the same. So all of the conditions are the same except for, which one? Memory. What does it mean? Okay. For example, now these numbers are just a general example. Instead of, out of 1,000 hadith, instead of making 5 mistakes, he made 15. So we say, it's not perfect memory, where he rarely ever makes a mistake. It's good memory. It's good, but he does make a few mistakes. Obviously, the numbers, like I said, differ from narrator to narrator. Even the muhaddith himself, one may consider something to be perfect, the other may consider it to be good. The third person might be too strict and say, nah, that's weak. That's a really bad memory. But the point being is, what's the difference between hasan and sahih? The memory. Instead of perfect memory, good memory. They still have to be trustworthy. Not trustworthy, we're not accepting that hadith. And the reason for this is because we're going to learn later, if a hadith is hasan, you still act upon it. You still accept it as a dalil. Okay? I think somebody asked me a question actually. Yeah. So Mr. Barakallah Fiqh, what's the difference between dalil and hujjah? Both are the same, both mean proof. They both mean proof, there's no difference. Okay? So what's the difference between hasan and sahih? Just the memory. Okay. What about da'if? And by the way, the ulama, the salaf, especially if you go the earlier you go, they actually split hadith into two. Into maqbool and mardud. Accepted and rejected. What they meant by accepted was sahih and hasan. And what they meant by rejected is da'if. What they meant by rejected was da'if. So that's why we act upon sahih and hasan. That's called maqbool, it's accepted. Obviously hasan is not on the same level as sahih. And there's benefits to that which we're going to get to shortly. Okay? But we have to differentiate between hasan and sahih, and in da'if is something completely different. So what is da'if? Da'if is any hadith which has not fulfilled the conditions of an accepted hadith. A da'if is a hadith which has not fulfilled the conditions of an accepted hadith. What's an accepted hadith? Sahih and hasan. Meaning, if there's a person, you guys tell me, I'm going to give you different scenarios. You tell me, what's the ruling on the hadith? One person is missing from the chain. Da'if. All of the narrators are trustworthy apart from one. Da'if. All of the narrators are perfect memory, but one's got good memory. Hasan, which is type of maqbool. All of the narrators are perfect memory, but one has weak memory. One has really bad memory, can't remember his own name. Definitely da'if, very, very weak da'if. They say da'if jiddan, like, very, very da'if. All the conditions are there, but he contradicts somebody else. So more trustworthy. Da'if. There's a hidden defect. Da'if. Good. So if none of the conditions of sahih are fulfilled, and likewise, it's not good memory, so none of the conditions of hasan are fulfilled, what's the ruling on that hadith? It is da'if. Right. What I'm going to do is give you guys 5 minutes. 5 minutes, go over these conditions and memorize them properly. Test the person next to you. Yes?
Whose definition was that for hasan?
Ibn Hajar. Al-Hafiz Ibn Hajar. Right. So it's 5 past now, yeah? You go until 10 past? Yeah? Maqbool, mardud. From the word rad. When you rad someone, what does that mean? You refute them, you rebuke them, you rejected. Yeah, so mardud is rejected. I think same in Urdu. Same in Urdu. Okay, 5 minutes. Memorize these conditions. And test the person next to you. Hazir is called shaz. Shuzuz is a singular. No, shuzuz. طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نعيم, stand up. 5 conditions quickly. What about the sanad? Complete chain of narration. What does it mean to be trustworthy? Okay, sit down. Amash, stand up. What are the 2 types of precision? The book. Haidar, stand up. What's the difference in Sahih and Hasan?
Hasan is exactly the same as Sahih itself.
Good. What's your name? Yusuf. What's the definition of a da'if hadith? Doesn't fulfill one of the conditions of? So instead of Sahih and Hasan, give me one word. Maqbool, accepted hadith. Good. Right. Now move on to the next page. Okay. How many did I say? When I say in the beginning, how many did I say are there in total? How many types? 5. So the 3 I gave in the beginning is just to make it easier for you to understand. Okay? Because basically what happens is that 2 of them split into 2 more. So in total, there are 5. So again, they'll be split into Sahih, Hasan and Da'if. Da'if stays Da'if. Okay, we're not going to worry about Da'if. Sahih and Hasan are of 2 types each. Sahih and Hasan are of 2 types each. I'll give you the names of all of them, and then we'll explain what it is. So just write down the names for now. The first type of Sahih in Arabic is called Sahih li dhatihi, which in English means Sahih by itself. Sahih li dhatihi, Sahih by itself. Sahih li dhatihi, Sahih by itself. And the other type of Sahih is Sahih li ghayrihi, Sahih by others or due to others. Sahih due to others. صحيح لغيره لغيره لام غين يا راء ها. Okay. Hasan is the exact same. We'll have Hasan لذاته, Hasan by itself, and then Hasan لغيره, Hasan due to others. So for SBI, يعني Sahih by itself, and then Sahih by others or due to others, and then Hasan by itself, and a Hasan by others or due to others. And here we have Da'if. Yeah? So how many do we have in total? What are the 5 types of hadith? Sahih by itself, Sahih by others, Hasan by itself, Hasan by others, and Da'if. These are the 5. Or in Arabic, صحيح لذاته, صحيح لغيره, حسن لذاته, حسن لغيره, ضعيف. Does that make sense? Okay, let's go through them. What is Sahih by itself? Sahih by itself is the same Sahih that we mentioned before. i.e. that Sahih fulfills the 5 conditions. So, I'm just going to put number 5 there. That's a 5. Yeah? So, okay? The exact same what we talked about before. What's Hasan by itself? Again, the exact same what we mentioned before, the same 5 conditions. And the only difference between Sahih is the memory. So far, with the exact same. Right. The 2 new ones are these 2. Sahih by others and Hasan by others. Okay, what is Sahih by others and Hasan by others? Sahih by others, basically, you have a hadith. The hadith in of itself is actually Hasan li dhati. It's actually Hasan. So it's a hadith which starts off Hasan. However, we have other narrations, other chains of narrations that the same of this hadith. So they say the same thing. So because that same hadith has other narrations, those other narrations strengthen this hadith. It strengthens it and it brings it up to the level of sahih. So for example, you have a hadith where an actual hadith is going to come later, but I'm going to make one just so you understand, right? First, I'll give you an example, just like a normal example, yeah? Now, in terms of strength, Allahumma barik, Haydar is sahih li dhatihi, Allahumma barik. Yeah? No, so when somebody sees him on the street, no one's going to mess with him. But then we'll have Amash, who's Hasan li dhati. He's Hasan by itself. He's not da'if, but average. But he's now walking down the street with Haydar. And he's walking down the street with Usama. Yeah? And he's walking on the street with Shiraz. Them three are walking on the street with Amish. Somebody's walking on the street, are they going to fight with, are they going to pick on Amish now? So somebody else who might even be sahih. Yeah? Are they going to pick on Amish? Why not? Amish is Hasan. Are they going to pick on him? No, why? Because the man them are with him, the boys are with him. Yeah? So that strengthens him, and it's as though he's on the level of sahih due to the support that he has. The same thing in hadith. The same thing in hadith. If you have a hadith where one of the narrators has good memory, like just think about it, even think about it logically. Why have you said that this hadith is hasan? Because the person's got good memory. Now he's trustworthy and everything, but there's a slight chance that he could have made a mistake. When it's perfect memory, then it's a very, very rare chance, right? And it's so rare that we don't, it's fine, it's not an issue. But when it's good memory, he could make a mistake. Unlikely, but he could. For that reason, we'll say hasan. But if there's other people who are around him, who have said the exact same thing as what he said, then we're going to say, okay, we believe what you say, right? It's sahih. Right? Yes.
Does those other hadith have to be sahih?
They don't have to be sahih. They can be. The other supporting narrations could be hasan as well. Okay, for example, if I was to say something in class, you guys go along and say, Huzaifah said this in class. Right? And the person who's saying it is a hasan narrator. But him by himself, you might be like, okay, we'll check it out. But now if 10 other guys come to you, they're all hasan. They're all saying the exact same thing. You're going to believe it now, aren't you? Khalas, same thing here. So that's what sahih li ghayrihi is. It's sahih by others. Okay, what is hasan li dhati? Hasan li dhati is what we mentioned before. What's hasan li ghayrihi? Hasan by others? It's a hadith which originally was da'if. But due to supporting narrations, it's now become stronger and it becomes hasan li ghayrihi. Now, there are some other conditions that they mentioned. The main thing is that when we say originally it's da'if, it can't be very weak. It can't be da'if jiddan. Or especially it can't be fabricated and so on. Da'if itself is different, has so many different levels, which we're going to mention a few later. When we say hasan li ghayrihi, it was da'if, but the weakness is very little. For example, somebody has weak memory. Weak memory, is there a possibility you can get it right? There's a possibility you can get it right. We know that he's not going to lie about it. We know that there's no one missing in the chain. Because if somebody's missing in the chain, what does that mean? It means that, even the person trustworthy, it means that, okay, somebody's missing. Who's that person that's missing? That person who's missing could be a liar. We don't have a clue. So there's a big risk there. With a person who's weak memory, if he's saying something, the Prophet said this, right? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you know that he's being truthful. Yes, there's a chance that he's making a mistake because he's weak. But if there's other supporting narrations, then we'll accept it because we know that he's not a liar. You understand? So weak memory is something considered a light type of a weakness, not a severe type of weakness. We're going to mention some of the different types of weakness in a second. Yes?
Let's say there's 6 people in the chain and the
Yeah.
couldn't you just cut him out and start the narration from the third one and say, these 3 people are
Okay, so I'm going to repeat the question. So let's say there's 6 people in a chain of narration. Let's say number 4 is weak. Can we not just say, okay, forget the bottom 2 and just start from number 3 and be like, from 3 onwards it's authentic? So how has hadith reached us? The scholars wrote it in books, right? Okay. So if Imam Bukhari has mentioned 6 people, how can we skip the first 2? How are you going to skip the first 2? We have to know, because them 2 narrated it for it to get to Imam Bukhari. Right? So we have to know them 2. If they're weak, khalas, we not accept it. If number 3 now was somebody who's got his own book and he narrated it himself in his book, obviously he's not going to have the people after him then, number 5 and whoever, number 6. Yeah, we say, okay, his narration in his book is sahih. But the narration in the other book, which has more people and the da'if people in it, that will not be sahih. So sometimes the ulama differentiate and they might say, the hadith is sahih, but this sanad is da'if. Meaning, the hadith generally, because of the other book, the third person stopped and he wrote it in his book. Right? So, right, the hadith we know is authentic. But this particular sanad, this particular chain of narration in this book is da'if. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Everyone's okay, or is that confused now? Okay.
Multiple da'if for the hasan.
Now this is, some ulama are very strict. They say da'if plus da'if plus da'if plus da'if does not equal hasan.
No, I mean,
لغيره. Because they say it's like 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0, doesn't matter. And some ulama are saying, no, it's not 0, it's 0.2 or 0.3. Therefore, if there's enough da'if ones, then we will accept it to go hasan لغيره. Some ulama differ.
but in general, it's da'if for multiple hasan.
No, generally. Okay. Everything I've just mentioned to you now, obviously I've made it easy by drawing graphs for you. Yeah? Now if you were to open up a normal book of hadith, like I've got a book of Mustalah Hadith here, there's no graphs, hardly any. Sometimes there's graphs at the end, but this one there's none. Okay? So I've made it easy by making these graphs for you. But we do need to go through some technical issues, which we will go through now, which we will have to do a lot of reading now. Okay. So miscellaneous issues, extra issues pertaining to these types of hadith. Firstly is definition. So let's just read the part which I've written. Alhamdulillah, I've gone to the books of hadith and actually translated word for word what the scholars have said with translation. So alhamdulillah, that's going to make your life a lot easier. What's the definition of sahih hadith? Let's read what it says. When scholars define an authentic hadith, their definition is basically a sentence with all of the conditions within it. So all the 5 conditions, they just put all of that in a sentence, and that's the definition of sahih hadith. For example, Ibn al-Salah, memorize this name. Al-Hafiz Ibn al-Salah. He's one of the main guys when it comes to Mustalah al-Hadith, and the main scholars. And his name will come again and again, and later on I'll speak about the scholars, but let's just try to get used to these names. He defines, his book basically, the reason it's so important is the main book, you could say, in Mustalah al-Hadith. Every single person that came after him based their works upon his books. Okay, his book is famously known as Muqaddimah Ibn Salah, the Muqaddimah, the introduction of Ibn Salah. I think it actually calls it Ulum al-Hadith. But anyways, he says, a Sahih Hadith is a Hadith which has a fully connected chain via the transmission of a trustworthy and completely precise narrator upon a trustworthy and completely precise narrator, in every single level, until the end, without contradictions and hidden defects. Basically the 5 conditions. Yeah? Sentence make sense? Anyone doesn't make sense? 4? Okay. What's the ruling on a sahih hadith? Meaning, if we have a sahih hadith, what do we do with it? The ruling of a sahih hadith is that there's ijma', there's consensus from the scholars of hadith that it is a dalil and it's obligatory to act upon it. It is a proof and it's obligatory to act upon it. Meaning, if a sahih hadith comes to you saying the Prophet said, do X, Y, and Z, it's obligatory upon you to do X, Y, and Z. Obviously, if there's other ahadith and other ayat that say something else, and obviously you put all of them together and then you come to a conclusion. But generally, this hadith comes to you and it's sahih, it's obligatory upon you to act upon it. And this is by ijma', consensus of all of the scholars of hadith. Likewise, all of the scholars of fiqh and usul of fiqh who are considered authorities, they also say all say the same. Right. What's the benefit of knowing which hadith is authentic? There's a number of benefits for this. The first benefit is that we know it's a proof. Right? So whatever it tells us to do, we have to act upon it. The same as the ruling. That's the first benefit. The second benefit is similar to the first, but the ulama make it separate, is it's not allowed for anybody to leave it off except with another proof. It's not allowed for anybody to leave it off except for another proof. Rather, they have to submit to it. They have to submit and surrender to it. So you're not allowed to leave it off except with another proof. So what does another proof mean? For example, the Prophet said I can't remember the authenticity of it, but I believe it's authentic. The Prophet said, غُسْلُ الْجُمْعَةِ وَاجِبٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُحْتَلِمٍ. That showering, having a ghusl on Jum'ah is wajib, obligatory, upon everyone who reaches the age of puberty. By itself, we would take the ruling that it is obligatory to shower every Friday. But what's the ruling on showering on Friday? Sunnah. But the hadith says, no. That's because we have another hadith with the Prophet, he said along the lines of that whoever wants to shower can shower, whoever doesn't want to, then wudu will suffice them. So we can go away from the ruling of obligation to a ruling of recommendation. Why? Because of another hadith, due to another ruling. But by itself, if we just had that hadith, then what would be the ruling? Wajib, obligatory. Okay. The third benefit is that it helps us in ta'arud. What does ta'arud mean? Anyone know? There's a chapter in Usul al-Fiqh called Ta'arud al-Adillah. Okay, ta'arud, we'll use the word, let's use the word contradictory, when the proofs are contradictory to one another. Now what it means contradictory is not the same as shuzuz that we mentioned before. What this basically means is, let's say we have two hadiths. One hadith says one thing, the other hadith says another thing. How do we deal with one of them? How do we deal with it? Okay? And this is not regarding like the same situation. It's like two different situations. The one time the Prophet said it's halal, 5 years later the Prophet said it's haram. For example. Okay? What do we do? Okay. In Usul al-Fiqh, this is a benefit from Usul al-Fiqh. The ulama give us guidelines. They say the first thing that you do is al-jam'. You try to combine between the two, if you're able to. So maybe in a certain scenario it's halal, and in a certain scenario it's haram. For example, using water for wudu is obligatory. But if a person's got an injury and him by using that water is going to kill him or something like that, then khalas, you can't use water. You should do tayammum. For example, so if you're able to do jam', if you're able to combine between them, then you combine. If you can't combine, then the ulama differ, but generally they say, if you're able to do naskh means abrogation. Meaning if you know that one was, one hadith came later than the other hadith, then you give preference to the later one. And it's abrogated the previous one, meaning it's taken over. We no longer act upon the previous one, we act upon the newer one. That's what they call naskh. Okay? Noon, sin, kha, which is Arabic abrogation. And the third thing is they do tarjih. Tarjih, basically you have the two hadith, you have to give preference to one of them. You have to give preference to one of them. Now, in Usul al-Fiqh, they mention so many different reasons as to how, what decides which hadith you give preference to. One of the ways is this. If one hadith was sahih and the other was hasan, which one do you give preference to? Sahih hadith. Okay, so it helps us in tarjih, in giving preference to one hadith when they are contradicting one another, or when you have to give preference to one over the other. So number 3 you could write, it helps us when giving preference to one hadith over another. Okay, so these are 3 benefits. Okay, today I have to leave early, so what we're going to do inshallah is we'll stop here for today. Next lesson we'll continue some of the extra points regarding these types of hadith, and then we'll also start and hopefully take all the other types of hadith as well and divide hadith from different angles as well. So that will be on Tuesday, inshallah. Are there any questions before we finish? So that's like contradictory hadith. Sorry? Oh, الشاذ حديث ضعيف. الشاذ حديث ضعيف. It would be a subcategory of ضعيف. The thing is, ضعيف has so many subcategories. We're going to get to it. Right now we're just talking about like authentic hadith and the different types. We're going to talk about some other issues. Next lesson, in the beginning of next lesson, inshallah, I'll mention some of the different types of ضعيف. The thing is, this, what we're going through now, the different types of hadith, I'll just summarize for you here. There's actually a whole science called Mustalah al-Hadith. Mustalah al-Hadith, which translates to terminologies of hadith. And in there you talk about all of this. And in there you learn about all the different types of da'if hadith. We're not going to go into all the different types of da'if, because we're not doing Mustalah hadith. I'm just summarizing the main things for you. But there's so many different types of da'if hadith, which we will talk about in next lesson as well, inshallah. Any other questions? What was that word that I mentioned with ta? I think it means ta'arud, maybe. Ta'arud. Or tarjih. Tarjih means to give preference to one over the other. So you might hear the word rajih. In this issue, the rajih, i.e. the correct opinion, the stronger opinion, i.e. the opinion that we give preference to. For example, do we do raf' al-yadayn in salah or not? The Hanafi say no, because of the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud. But we would say the rajih is, i.e. the correct opinion, the one that we give preference to, is that you do it. Because firstly, there's so many companions, and from them the 10 who were promised paradise, all narrated the Prophet did it. And many of them are sahih and so on. And Ibn Mas'ud is one. Secondly, the one of Ibn Mas'ud, the ulama differ over its authenticity, whereas these, many of them are 100% authentic, and so on. So other reasons, so we say, therefore the rajih in this opinion is that you do raf' al-yadayn in salah. So that's the word rajih and tarjih. That's how you would use it. It depends on the hadith. Sometimes one, sometimes so. If you have a hasan li ghayrihi, you have a hasan li dhati, what will make it sahih li ghayrihi? Sometimes one sahih hadith. It all depends on the scholar who's looking at it. Okay, it all depends on the scholar what he, what he would consider it to strengthen it. So it differs from muhaddith. So muhaddithun themselves are different types. You get those who are proper strict, then you get those who are really lenient, then you get those in the middle as well. So it all depends on the scholar who's looking at it. And that's why sometimes in a fiqhi issue, one scholar may want to say one thing and the other scholar may say another thing. And one student might turn around and say, it's a sahih hadith, how can you go against a sahih hadith? La, this could be sahih according to this scholar, but according to another scholar, he may not see it to be sahih. So inshallah later we will study a book called Raf' al-Malam, removing the blame. And A'immat al-A'lam, from the Imams by Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, where he mentions reasons why scholars differ. And he mentions a lot. Inshallah we'll go through it inshallah. Okay, we'll stop here then inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.